This is TWiT.
You got something cool, Jason.
I got
jealous
something cool. It's cool if you like OnePlus. Do you still like OnePlus? How do you feel about OnePlus as a brand, Mishaal? They've gone through a lot of changes. Are you pro OnePlus, or where you stand right now?
So I take the approach that you really shouldn't be a fan of a brand. You should be a fan of products. Evaluate products individually.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of a brand, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
That is
wow. Mishaal's his own man. I like it.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
I think that's a very measured and fair statement, actually.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate that, especially in the era of people becoming just like total fanboys or fangirls over like Apple or Samsung, whatever, and everything that company does is great. And we know that isn't always the case, right? Sometimes they do great things. Sometimes, some aspects of their devices are not so great. So I think that's great. That's totally fair to not kind of blind ourselves with that kind of blind devotion to a brand. And I would say that OnePlus is a company that a lot of people have had brand devotion to. And that's probably part of the reason why in the last couple of years, I feel like I've heard more and more disappointment about the devices coming out because people are comparing the device that is now to the device that was 2 years ago or 3 years ago or whatever that history is, expecting more of the same. And especially with OnePlus, what we're seeing and what we definitely see with the 10, with the 10T, is that things have changed. And I'll get to kind of some of the ways in which that has changed. I'm not going to go into like your typical spec-filled rattle fest as far as this review is concerned. I basically broke it down into 3 categories: the good, the indifferent, and the bad. So the OnePlus 10T, $649. And basically, every year you've got your regular and pro release of OnePlus devices. And then about halfway through, they've got the T release, which generally tends to be less expensive than like the Pro that came out like 5 or 6 months ago, but has some upgraded features, still offers some things, might lose a few things. And that's definitely the case with the 10T. So let's start with the good. First and foremost, Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. So it's got the very current Snapdragon processor inside. Also up to 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage. That is the configuration that OnePlus sent me for this review with this device. The charging is one thing that when you see a lot of reviews on this device, that's one of the top things that is called out. It is ridiculously fast. It's 150 watt super VOOC. Do they call it VOOC or VOOC? VOOC? I'm not quite sure. But they include the brick in the box because that is required in order to get those fast speeds. You could still charge this with the USB-C port and a standard charger. You're just not going to get those speeds, and by those speeds, I mean, I think if you plug this in at 0% for 10 minutes, you get somewhere around 50 to 60% of charge in 10 minutes. It's pretty ridiculous, which is awesome. In this day and age, battery technology tends to kind of throttle a lot of what we do with our devices and the longevity of it. So at least if you have crazy fast charging speeds, that gets around that a little bit. The display is very nice. It's a high refresh, 120 hertz display. It is 1080p, but it's a 6.7 inch display, 800 nits. So it has a reasonable brightness out in sunlight. And I think things just look really sharp in person. And I mean, I should have roped this with the charging, but the battery life itself is actually pretty excellent. I had many times where, a few times where I was driving long distances, navigating, and when I got there and looked at the battery depletion, which tends to be the hardest that I hit my batteries these days, I saw hardly any drop off on that. Not nearly as much as I'm used to seeing with the Pixel. The indifferent. So it's got the cameras on the back, right? It's got 3 cameras, and I'd say 2 of those cameras, which are the wide and the main, which is the main is a 50 megapixel and 8 megapixel wide. They're fine. What you're not going to see here that you saw on the Pro and even last year's models was Hasselblad iconography and Hasselblad branding on the cameras. And you don't get that here. There's no Hasselblad tuning. And I don't know if that's the specific reason why the images are are fine, but I did include a link in the doc there to a photo album with just a couple of photos, a couple of random photos that I took with my time with this device. And I'd say the photos, they were in great sunlight. Things looked really good. There was some low light, and actually I forgot to include some low light stuff here, but low light looked all right. But there's like some I really like some of those shots. I got these really great shots with like my daughter and a couple of other kids playing with bubbles and stuff. It was pretty cool. But anyway, some of the really bright shots just kind of feel a bit blown out, a little crunchy at times. I think the next one shows some henna art that was like, this is one henna image, and then if you go to the next one, I think it's a close-up. That one turned out really good. Just got some nice sparkle to it, really nice color distribution images. That's me and my lady. We were at an event here in Petaluma. Why am I blanking on the name of it? Anyways, doesn't matter. So anyways, pictures, I would say I wasn't like blown away by them, but they were totally usable. But then we go to the bad, which is that, yes, everybody's complaining about the macro camera, and there is a macro as the third lens on this, and I actually like macro. But, oh yeah, that was a slow-mo shot that I thought was cool. So that's a macro, and if you zoom in on that, which you can do in Google Photos, I mean, it might be hard to see on the stream, but there isn't a whole lot of clarity to the macro, and the focus. The focal distance, like getting the shot right, was kind of finicky. I don't know. Things just got muddier than I would like for a macro. I would hope that a macro would be a little bit sharper than that. So that was a miss. And then let's see here. Oh, so this is a big miss, or this might turn people off. So cut to the phone here. One thing you're not going to find on the design of this device, and this is another thing that a lot of people are calling out, and I think touches on exactly what you were talking about just a few minutes ago, Mishaal, is that there is no alert slider here. So since I think the OnePlus 2, their devices have included a little slider similar to what Apple includes on iOS devices on the iPhone. And it's just an alert slider, allows you to go from, muted or silent to vibrate to volume on. And it's really been largely a signature component to OnePlus devices. And this is kind of the first of their more expensive models. I think some of their really cheap budget ones didn't have the alert slider, but this is the first of their more expensive models that doesn't have the alert slider. Now, OnePlus has said, don't worry, we're going to bring it back. We just couldn't fit it in here. There were too many other things. I can't remember their exact rationale for it, but they explained it away. And I don't actually know whether they're right or wrong, or, if that's damage or PR control or whatever. But I do know that, touching on what you were talking about, Mishaal, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that I think that there's a lot of brand affinity with OnePlus, and that there has been, and things like this being removed tend to remind longtime OnePlus users of the sameness of modern OnePlus devices, how they're just kind of starting to blend in with devices of the current generation of smartphones being made by other manufacturers. Meanwhile, a couple of years ago, that wasn't always the case. Their phones actually really kind of stood out. Where do you stand on that, considering what you were talking about a few minutes ago?
So I don't know exactly to what extent like the merger of OnePlus and Oppo has like affected product R&D for like OnePlus devices, but it seems to me, since like after the first OnePlus Nord, first OnePlus Nord was pretty unique, but it seems like devices since have basically been Oppo first designs, and then using OnePlus as like a branding to market it overseas. Yep. Oxygen OS used to have its own distinct identity and was clearly had a different code base than Color OS. Now it is basically just a visual theme of Color OS. And this is like great for OnePlus to save costs, because, operating in your own product R&D, designing your own phone and then developing and maintaining that custom fork of Android, Oxygen OS, is expensive. But now they can basically, start with Oppo R&D and add Oxygen OS, and maintain that OnePlus branding, that branding they've built up for a long time. Add a few features here and there that they think that might, appeal to their, semi-enthusiast audience, and then release the product. And you're starting to see some of these iconic identity elements being removed, like the alert slider from the OnePlus 10T. It was already gone from several OnePlus Nord phones, like the budget Nord N10 and Nord N100. And then the Hasselblad, they made a huge deal of that. They spent like a multi-million-dollar deal on doing that. And like, where is that? Why is that gone from this device? Like, I don't really know, but they're definitely. That's why I say, like, if you are expecting a brand to remain the same for every product, to have the same consistency, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because very few brands can do that.
Well, I don't know about that, Mishaal. I mean, as somebody who does align with brands in a lot of different places, both in technology and in like record labels and like things like some like the relationship a brand builds with its customers is a special one, right? And you have people who want to be loyal to a brand and they want to be loyal for life. And inevitably not every brand, but in a lot of cases, we see the evolution go where that brand takes for granted that loyalty, right? Or they cut corners, or they have to make decisions that don't deliver on the same quality promise that made people fall in love with the brand for the first time and continue on with that. And that makes that relationship tricky. We've all been through that. We've been through this with Google and Android over 10 plus years, right, Jason? I mean, like things that we've loved and then things that we haven't loved. And it's like this like ebb and flow and emotional roller coaster of your relationship with the brand. But I do think that there, I don't think that aligning yourself with a brand is setting yourself up for disappointment, because there are cases of brands who continue to deliver on that and will. Admittedly, in technology, it is hard because we, people who are tried and true HTC people are really kind of feeling it now because of the turns that brand has taken. Sure. But the thing is, though, and I think the point you made earlier about how they've kind of, in the wake of Carl Pei leaving and in the wake of Oppo and kind of the reunification of them with, not reunification, but like the unification of them with Oppo, you have seen that kind of like the OnePlusness go away a little bit, and Oppo kind of taking advantage of what that customer base is. And, you said yourself, they probably spent millions on the Hasselblad thing and now it's gone. I wonder why, because probably the return wasn't there. Because like something happens in every mature business brand, whether it's a technology company, a software company, a media company, anything like that, is it starts out, there's a lot of excitement, there's something really unique and special, fans fall in love with it, fans get loyal, and then it becomes a real business. And then bean counters come in and spreadsheets and, trending analysis and things like that. And then they have to make hard business decisions. And I feel like we're in this phase now, at the OnePlus 10, we're at this phase where them as a company, them and Oppo, in bed as they are maturing and making the decisions they need for the good of their company and their shareholders. So it's it definitely is tricky, but I don't think it always means disappointment, I guess, is my long-winded way of saying it.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if something like the notification slider, is that something that people will really miss? Like, I know people are very vocal about it. And I point it out because it's certainly something that I noticed, right? But when I really think about my time using OnePlus devices, and mind you, I've used a lot of them over the years, I really don't touch the notification slider. Like, I just don't. Like, I usually keep it on silent. But that's my use of smartphones in general. I usually keep my smartphones on silent, maybe vibrate. But it's just, so I guess everybody's using it differently. I wonder if the people who are upset about the slider going away are upset about it for reasons other than, I love the slider, why is it gone? You know what I mean? And I'm sure there are people that miss it because they love the slider, but I'm pretty sure there are other people that are sad to see it go because of how they feel it confirms their beliefs that OnePlus is losing its way, if that makes sense. And then just to wrap up on this review, fingerprint sensor, it's an in-display fingerprint sensor. It's really low. And so, which isn't the end of the world, but I actually had, that worked fine, but I've had issues unlocking from time to time that, it was kind of finicky for me. So that was kind of a bummer. You don't get wireless charging. You only get IP54, which is less water and dust protection than you got on the where are we now? 10 Pro and the 10. And finally, that charging, going back on that, it is a proprietary standard. So you have to have that brick in order to enjoy the 150 watt. And, in this day and age with USB-C and the USB-C power delivery, capacity increasing and improving, it's kind of a bummer that we still have these proprietary charging standards. But there you go. All things said and done, though, $649 for a screaming fast device, which is, I would say, what the 10T really is above all else. It's really, kind of focused on speed, be it charging, be it performance. And from that perspective, it really does a great job. It really delivers. You are sacrificing some things. But, $649, it's not a horrible price for a screaming fast phone. If that's your priority, there you go. So,
all right.
OnePlus 10T.